of yoga, arising from meditation on earth, water, light, air, and ether, and when they appear to the yogin, then he has become possessed of a body made of the fire of yoga, and he will not be touched by disease, old age, decay, and death. Well, that was the sloka we left off with, and we looked at these basic connections here. Probably what we didn't look at too well was the bottom half of this chart, because that's interesting. You see, when you say they want us to meditate on earth, and then spend some time doing that, and then meditate on water, then meditate on fire. How to meditate? Right here. First, you meditate on earth according to its origin, utpatti. Where has it come from? And of course, in such a look, you're going to probably go beyond evolution. That is the Big Bang Theory and so forth. And you're probably, if you're interested in yoga, you're probably going to start tracing origins back inside of yourself. Because the great souls have told you the kingdoms of heaven are within you, so kingdoms are made of earth, here at least. So you would probably want to look for them inside of yourself. Look at them outside, and they're changing at a billionth of a second on the molecular level, and they're also changing every year, every decade, every century, every lifetime on the level of time. So then you look at earth according to its origin, then according to its qualities, attributes, and characteristics. How many different kinds of earth can you think of? How many different kinds of metal are there? How many different kinds of chemicals? How many different kinds of wood? And so forth. You meditate it all. You put it all into a conglomerate. See, and all of earth. What is earth? See, what do they mean by earth? What a vast spectrum does it cover. Then you meditate on its consistency and its content. See, what does it consist of? Then you meditate on its appearance in waking and dream. Now, if you had taken a wrong track earlier and you had looked outside towards the Earth being somewhere up in the planets, the Earth being a planet, and all of a sudden they're steering you back towards the idea that Earths are created inside the mind. That's why I just chanted Agnir Murta Chakshusi Chandra Suryao Vishaha Shrotrivak Vibrita Shvedaha. The sun is his head, and fire is his head, and the sun and moon are his two eyes. See, so you start thinking about the revelatory power of light in the sun and in the moon, how the moon borrows light from the sun, and then all of a sudden you start thinking in terms of a cosmic being who's standing behind light and making light shine. That's why we chanted last night, Na Tatra Surya Bhati, Na Chandra Tarakam, Nema Vidyutto Bhanti, Kuto Yamagnihi. Basically, there, inside of my great self, the sun does not shine, nor does the moon shine there, nor do lightning shine, nor does fire shine there. That one light shines there, and from its light, all other lights are made radiant. So you can't mistake the implication of a sloka like that from the Upanishads. That one light shining, all else shines. All suns all in the sky have been made to shine by the light of consciousness. So you're going to find that in your waking and dreaming state. See? You're going to bring your consciousness to bear in your waking and dreaming state. Ramprasad sings, "O mind, O sleepy mind, you wander about with your eyes open, but you're still totally asleep." See? What I'm saying is most people don't even bring light into their waking state, let alone into their dreaming state. So when you have a chart like this, they want you to bring light into A, U, and M. See these sets of fives across there, across the top? Here, they're set down here in a list. And they're called 19 mouths. So earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Here are the five elements. Then speaking, acting, moving, procreating, and eliminating are the five active senses. sound, hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling, and their components of sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. Two other sets of fives are the cognitive senses, and the antakarna is the fourfold mind. The ancient rishis are calling them your 19 mouths, the 19 mouths of God, in case you've forgotten to bring light into your waking state. And further on, they're going to want you to look at these three states along with it. In waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, the 19 mouths are operative. That is, when you go into dreaming state, these go subtle on you, don't they? You don't have gross air and gross fire and gross earth, but you have subtle air, subtle fire, and subtle earth. And you have subtle seeing, subtle tasting, and so forth inside of your dream state. And there, as you go further inward towards your mind, then you begin to come upon your deep sleep state, when the mind goes quiet, peaceful. It's like going into deep sleep. So they're talking about your three states of awareness. The 7 limbs are what I just chanted at the beginning of the class, was basically this. Agnir Murta Chakshusi Chandrasuryao. Fire is his head, the sun and moon his 2 eyes. And the vision of scriptures is cosmic mind. See? So there you see, skies are his body, sun is, moon is 2 eyes, the air and wind his breath, and the earth is his feet, water is his lower organ, and so forth. His head is the heavens. So that's the idea of this cosmic being that stands behind everything as consciousness. If you're not into deities and you think that gods in heaven are too far a stretch for you, then just think of it as consciousness coming through the senses, operating the 19 mouths, present there in all 3 states of your consciousness, and using 7 limbs to get about, as it were. See? So, with that as a sort of reference, then look back at what they're saying here in this sloka. See, you become possessed of a body made of the fire of yoga when you do this meditation. Then they want you to meditate on Earth's changing nature. Now they're taking you towards the illusoriness of all things, the appearance of things, vivarta, adhyasa. False superimposition is the English term we borrowed from that form covers formlessness. Like Sri Ramakrishna's story of the green scum on a lake. He just reached down and pushed to the side and he could see himself, and the green scum came dancing back and obliterated his view. So just like that, Maya, or form, covers formlessness, and you have to make a little effort to push it away. But if you don't keep the effort up, it'll come dancing back and obscure your true nature again. Therefore, mankind is constantly thinking of himself as nature instead of spirit. You cannot serve God and mammon, is the idea. You must serve the sentient, you must serve the seer, you must become the seer, and then the sentient or nature will fall into its rightful place, not as your master, but as your slave, as your servant. So that's the problem in yoga. The seer has become identified with the seen, and now we want to reverse that tendency and put the seer back on his rightful throne. That seer is you, your true nature. And then you can officiate matters in nature most properly. Do you think it's just a matter of nature being inferior? It sounds to me like mankind is acting like it's inferior. Because look at what a mess he's making of nature, right? So if that's the case, then the solution is not to kowtow to nature, because nature's insentient. The green scum doesn't care. You see, I know Kea. You see, the green scum does not care whether you spread it apart. It'll just come dancing back anyway. That's its nature. So you're the one that has to make sure that you become the master of the senses and of these states of consciousness, and that's why they want you to go through this process of meditation. Do you ever get very much instruction about meditation anywhere, even from your guru? So here's the father of Vedanta, the father of yoga, giving you a meditation you can do on the cosmic principles that will remove your ignorance and return you to your rightful relationship as master, master of all things, master of the three matras of Om, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, AUM. They want you to become master of your waking state, master of your dreaming state, and master of your deep sleep state. So that's why they say here, meditate on earth, fire, water, fire, air, and ether as it appears to you in your waking and dreaming state, because then you'll begin to know its changing nature. And when you know its changing nature, you'll want off the merry-go-round ride. You'll want to get out of the bathtub, you're clean. You'll begin thinking in terms of higher bliss rather than ephemeral happiness, which comes and goes. Something that's constant, unalloyed, uninterrupted. And that's what you're going to be leaning towards, and you're not going to want any substitutes. Next, they want you to meditate on its place in the mind and the thoughts, because now they're making a connection to you that not only must you detach from nature in order to see your true sentient self, but in that process, they want you to make sure to know that all of these things in nature have come from the mind and from the thinking process. The great mind brooded, see, Lord Brahma brooded, and all things broke into creation. In fact, the exact sloka in the Upanishad says, Lord Brahma brooded and swelled with joy. And when he swelled with joy, all of this creation broke forth. So in his brooding process, and everything that's within him, he manifested it. The manifested Brahman, which we were looking at yesterday in that chart, the mighty river of the manifested Brahman. But in that process of elation, then all things were born, not just positive, but also their opposites. And that's sort of a natural consequence of stirring up the mind. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, don't stick a stick in a mud puddle, you see, and stir it up. It's going to take hours and hours for the sediment to settle. Just leave it clear and look at your reflection. Don't mess it up. So the mind holds so many things. Do you really want to place a stick in there and stir it up? You should rather be the observer of what the nature of the thing is. See? So you stand back and you meditate on everything that's in the mind in order to prove yourself that you're not mind. At one point you proved to yourself you were not the body. Now you have to do the same thing with this subtle body called the mind. That you're not the mind either, because it's constantly given to projection and withdrawal, projection and withdrawal. This is brooding and disseminating and then dispelling. See? It's the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in you. You can't help it. So meditate on all of these things as they appear in your mind and thoughts. Then meditate on how much power it holds over you. When you find them in your thoughts, how much power do the elements hold over you? Are you beholden to them, in other words? Are you a bondslave to them? Are you dependent upon them? Well, are you serving mammon instead of God? Are you still unaware of the fact that man does not live by bread alone, but there lives by something else, something higher, something subtler, something deeper, something nobler? If it's true that the soul is not matter, then the only way to prove itself to you is to leave matter alone. That's how Vivekananda said it. So he was a great being that, like Buddha, that just withdrew from matter, observed its workings, and then said, oh, I see all of that has come out of my thinking process. I think I'll develop an on-off switch somewhere in my mind, you see. So I can just shift this, turn it off when I don't want it anymore, you know, when it's become too much of a botheration, and turn it back on when I want to see it again, you see. So it's a yogic ability to behold the creation. And Sri Ramakrishna said it this way: the kid loves to build sandcastles out there, you see. And so he builds them right near the ocean because he loves to build them and play with them, but this favorite part is destroying them. He's waiting for that tide to come in so he can just watch the process get wiped away. That gives him the most joy. So we've sort of lost our joy with the power of dissolution. See? We're pretty good creators, and we want to keep the thing around a long time, but we don't know how to turn it off. We don't know how to dissolve it. If we could dissolve the mind, we would dissolve all the things that are in the mind. Let's see, lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame, pride of caste, pride of lineage, ignorance, fear, doubt, emotions. We could destroy all those if we could turn off the mind. They wouldn't plague us anymore. That is, we would be in control of our own facilities. See? And that's the ideal. That's what the yogi wants. Control the prana first, get a hold of the prana, then control the mind. And in that process, then everything comes under his mastery again. He puts it back in its original position, the way things started out. So meditate on the power of these things that they hold over you. You understand what I'm saying here? It's not just stopping at meditating on the 5 elements, but what about you get to these things? How much of a power does the sense of taste hold over you? How much of a power does the sense of taste hold over you? Or how much do seeing and looking at things, TVs, various things, images, hold over you? So you have to do this process, all of these bullet points, with all of these things in order to know them thoroughly as being aspects of your own projection. And then you become a master. You destroy fear, you destroy doubt, and you destroy your ignorance. And there's really no other way to completely destroy it. You may be a fortunate recipient of the grace of a guru, or even of God or of Mother, but Sri Ramakrishna said some beings she gives bhakti to, but other beings she gives both bhakti and jnanam to. Those she gives both bhakti and jnanam to, she wants them to teach others how to be free. And they're going to need to know every step. You can use a razor and kill yourself, but you're going to need a sword, a spear, a lance, a shield, a dagger, and a lot of resolve to kill anyone else, because they're not going to want to be killed. So a teacher needs to know everything. If you're a consummate yogi, you need to know all these things, and you need to know their connection back inside of you, yogic connections. Now the last thing here is its disappearance in deep sleep. And that's the very last thing that you'll see. That's the last form you'll behold, is when everything finally disappears into deep sleep, and then you go, who am I? Where did I go? What was I? When will I come back? See? Well, if you ask when, you're talking in terms of time. And if you ask where, you're talking in terms of space. And you ask what, you're talking in terms of objects. And you ask why, you're talking in terms of cause and effect, aren't you? But if you ask who am I, then all of a sudden you cut to the chase. You find that this self that disappears in deep sleep, eventually there's a witness to that disappearance. And that gives you a great key. So this whole thing is leading you up to finding that detached witness consciousness in you. Sakshi Bhutam, call it, the witness of all phenomena. Bhutas, all these beings and all these places out there, you become the witness of them. So it's really a yogi in training, you see, who is going through all these and then using these methods of meditation. This is out of the Yoga Sutras. If you want to study it completely, write in and take my Raja Yoga email course. You can start at lesson 1. The rest of us are all on lesson 77, but you can catch up. And in that you will find a huge, vast amount of wisdom that will help you with your practice. Things your guru could never tell you, in most cases, because he's too busy with 999,000 other beings. So you need to take some initiative, not just get initiation, take some initiative. and look into the scriptures. Now, the next sloka is interesting. It is said that the first signs of entering yoga are lightness of body, health, thirstlessness of mind, clearness of complexion, a beautiful voice, an agreeable odor, and scantiness of excretions. Interesting how the scriptures put that. Science and medicine and biology and everything, chemistry, spend oodles of time trying to figure out a cause for regularity and irregularity. What are they saying here? There's the scantiness of excretions. Maybe you should be putting less time into evacuating your lower organs and putting more time into illuminating your higher organ. So don't spend so much time with food and so forth. Aren't you getting on top of taste and so forth? Does a yogi eat 3 meals a day in the 4 or 5 food groups? Does he sleep 8 hours a night? No. All of that goes away when he starts practicing yoga. Besides, he's not interested in the 5 food groups. What are they now? Sugar, alcohol, tobacco, so forth. There's a new set of 5 food groups out there. Nicotine, alcohol, and other unsavory things. So scantiness of excretions and all these other things are a natural consequence of yogi practicing. Clear complexion, thirstlessness of mind. You see, thirstlessness of mind. It is not, Trishna is not present. Trishna means desire or thirst for satisfaction. Satisfaction which will never come. Satiation never comes with the senses and their objects. You have to withdraw and give that up and be a yogi. Be thou a yogi, Arjuna. That's how Krishna tells in the Gita. Now we have taken one new sloka and we've moved to the 3 from yesterday. Let's take another new sloka, sloka 14 of chapter 2 of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Just as the same metal disc, which was stained by dust before, shines brilliantly when polished, so the embodied being, seeing the truth of Atman, realizes oneness, attains the goal, and becomes sorrowless. The word here is ashoka. Ashoka means sorrow. There's a nice Swami right here in San Francisco in the old days called Swami Ashokananda. And so he was to have the bliss of no sorrow. He was always looking at the sorrowless ocean of light. That's how Patanjali put it. Sorrowless ocean of light. That's one of the 7 ways to meditate on reality, is to look at the sorrowless ocean of light. So it shines brilliantly when it's polished. There are a whole set of slokas here in this 2nd chapter towards the end is about yogic practice. It emphasizes sadhana, the import of sadhana. You can study and you can do your devotions and so forth. You could even meditate and so forth, but until you consider it your practice, you have to sort of mark it out as your practice. This is my yogic practice, and through that I am slowly penetrating the curtain of nescience. I'm doing away with my ignorance, and I'm clarifying my mind and sharpening and honing my intellect so that I can pierce through any barrier, any granti. I can untie any knot in my system, in my physical system, in my emotional system, in my psychological system, in my mental system, in my intellectual system, in my philosophical system, and in my spiritual system. At all levels of my being, I can untie any knot. Granti, anagranti, pranagranti, chittagranti, chittagranti, even there are spiritual knots that you have to untie. Like, why am I not making progress? See? Why am I taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back all the time? So let's look at that next, in accordance with this sloka 14, how a disc shines brilliantly when it's polished. last weekend in Portland, we saw this chart. It might be familiar to some of you by now. Basically, it has that beautiful picture of Ramakrishna and the woman that came to him who had lost her husband and her son in the same month. And she was beside herself with sorrow. And he grabbed her by the arms, jumped up, grabbed her by the arms, and danced around the room, singing, "She who has no one has God. She who has no one has God." And the woman left that day much relieved of a lot of her sorrow. So she had fallen into this heavy curtain of shoka, of grief. And it was natural, you could say. It was certainly understandable, but it was not necessary. And one needed to pierce through it, because your husband and your son have simply gone back to your own inner self, haven't they? Haven't you meditated on that and found out that all forms came from you and disappeared back into you, the real you? So then why not connect all these beings back into yourself eternally? When your baby comes forth, it's coming out of you, out of unmanifested prakriti in you, out of the deep sleep state, and as a projection, a conception of your own mind. And when your grandfather passes away, simply returning back into that self-same curtain, see, into that self-same unmanifested prakriti. And just like waves rise and fall in an ocean, nothing's changing. Billions of souls are born, billions of souls pass, and Brahman remains the same. So why shouldn't I be Brahman? Maybe I should try and be Brahman. Those who meditate on Brahman become Brahman. That's a statement right out of the Upanishads. Changeless, timeless, deathless, birthless, griefless. It's not that they're unfeeling and callous. It's just that they know better. So once hearing this truth, one cannot remain, again, a bondslave to nature, or to birth, to rebirth, and to death. I have received a command from the Divine Mother of the Universe that death must die, as one song in India sings. Or, my teacher used to say, you must make doubt doubt itself. You must make fear afraid of itself. You must put death in its own grave. For a man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. So he was imbued with those kinds of ideas from the Upanishads and the Gita, which he could recite by heart, the whole thing, in his 90s. So these ideas had become driven deep inside of his heart and mind. And there they were abiding all the time, just ready to flash forth at the surface if you needed to know something. A walking Upanishad, that man. And what to speak of his great teacher, his great master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So there you see the image. Dancing in the background is this reborn, this true soul, you see. So I used it as a backdrop to look at these causes and lack of spiritual success. Shankara says, for instance, spiritual success depends on qualification. Thus the seeker should take to study and reasoning after approaching the Guru, who must be among the best of the knowers of Brahman and an ocean of mercy. So Shankara and his line of gurus, Govindapada and Gaudapada, they have that deep inbred reverence for the line of gurus, for the Guru Parampara, it's called. So they're going to take to task the mind that is not making progress. So here are some of the things which he says about it. Causes for lack of spiritual success, in case you're interested or you're experiencing this, are attachment to objects and pleasures. Sri Ramakrishna says, once a sweetmeat goes down the throat, nobody even remembers what it tastes like. So why all this attachment to objects? Holy Mother once said, once the body's cremated, it's just a couple pounds of ash. So what's all this big deal about it? So objects are not going to get the upper hand on me, you see. Because if they do, then I tend to become attached to them. When I become attached, I become obsessed. When I become obsessed, I set myself up for disappointment when those objects are stolen, when they decay, when they're broken, when I get bored with them, or any host of other reasons you want to conjure up about objects. You haven't learned your lesson of the meaning of objects very well if the object is still an obstacle in your spiritual path. You haven't put it behind you. See, Christ wasn't talking about an incarnate devil when he said, "Get thee behind me." He's talking about the devilish tendency of the mind to get obsessed and to possess and to own. So get thee behind me, all those things, and let me see the truth unveiled. Let me see God face to face, which is what Mahatma Gandhi said about him. When we see Ramakrishna, we see God face to face. So once the sweetmeat goes down the throat, you don't remember it anymore. That's the nature of experiences with objects. So let them pass. Don't brood on them. Don't get attached to them. And then you'll find out that maybe that will be one of those obstacles that when it falls away will allow you to take 3 steps forward before you take those 2 steps back. Now another one is delusion concerning the true nature of Brahman, the self, and the world. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, "If my devotees know who I am, who they are, and what the world is, they will be fine." So the nature of the world is transitory, illusory, unreal, changing. The nature of Ramakrishna is the avatar, God in human form. And the nature of themselves is the Atman, pure and perfect, birthless, deathless, timeless, karmaless, stainless. So that's clarification on the level of the curtain of nescience, doubt, fear, and ignorance. You clarify those things, and then you begin to live in revelation of the nature of everything. You see everything as it is this sort of cliche saying nowadays. See everything just exactly as it is. You espy every ruse. You avoid every tendency for the wool to be pulled over your eyes. You see, you're always avoiding that kind of deception and seeing through to the highest truth at all the time. That's your challenge in life. You're going to want to do it first in the waking state, in case you haven't noticed. Then try it in your dreaming state. Then try it at the deep sleep level. Bring full consciousness to bear on all 3 levels, on all 3 bodies. Now, third is failure to awaken spiritually. The boy tells his mother, "Wake me up when the call of nature comes." The mother says, "You'll do that yourself. And if you don't, you'll soil your bed and have to sleep in it." So when this call for spirituality comes, let's see. Did I awaken when snow came, when smoke appeared, when the sun appeared, when wind and fire came, when fireflies came, when lightning split the curtain of nescience, when I saw a half moon or a full moon, when I saw crystals? Did I awaken then? Or did my parents or some psychotherapist tell me those are just facets of your imagination? Psychiatrists will say, well, that's all part of your imagination. It's all in your mind. And Vedanti would say, yes, doctor, you're right. It is all in my mind, but in a much different sense than you're proposing. Everything is in my mind, and I can prove it to you via Samkhya science. Because Freud and Jung never had an Oriental person on their therapy table. They only had Europeans. And they didn't get along either. The seers concur about the nature of truth. Nobody can concur about the nature of relativity as long as they're still in it, you see. Because their mind is changing from Rajas to Tamas to Sattva all the time. So they're viewing the world differently every day, every minute, every hour. Their perception changes. But the perception of the seer coming from here, Triveni means where the three spiritual rivers meet. You've got Shumna, the Ida, and the Pingala, or the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, if you want to call them those. All headed for the great confluence here, you see. Triveni, where all the spiritual rivers meet. The three sacred holy rivers meet there at the third eye. If you're seeing from that, if your eye be single, you shall know the truth, and nothing's hidden from you at that point. See? You're aware. So, failure to awaken spiritually needs to be addressed. It's one of the causes for lack of spiritual success. What is the teaching around the failure to awaken spiritually? It's the failure to awaken spiritually. What can I say? You know, I can talk all around it, but those 5 words will pretty much tell you what it is. So address it. And when these signs come that precede the manifestation of Brahman in your consciousness, take them seriously. Look into them. Like looking into meditating on air, earth, fire, water, and ether, tasting, touching, hearing, feeling, smelling, on all those 8 or 9 points. See, they give you the signs, and then they give you the method to do it. But you have to do it. No one else can do it for you. Sri Ramakrishna said, you know, I've gathered the wood, I've struck the spark, I've lit the fire, I've put your food on to cook, I've set the table, I've served you the food. Do I have to raise the food to your mouth now? Do I have to feed you? So the scriptures and the Guru provides everything there. All the teachings are there. You have to put them together and then engage in that. 4th is relying on refuge in home, spouse, wealth, and offspring. That's a lack of spiritual success. Don't mess with family, the bumper sticker says. See? But I'm here to mess with family. And if you cite Christ, he said this: they say I've come to bring peace. I have not come to bring peace. I've come to bring a sword. And with that sword I will divide father from son and mother from daughter. Now, what about that teaching? And what part of that teaching didn't you understand? If your father is spiritual and the son is not, then Jesus is going to divide them. You're serving Mammon, you're serving God. You go to the spiritual path, you're not ready. It's a matter of qualification. Didn't we just read that at the top of the chart? Spiritual success depends on qualification. So if you've qualified yourself, you're ready. And you can't qualify yourself until the signs come to you. Fireflies, smoke, the moon, the sun. The manifestation of Brahman in spiritual practice. So, messing with family, yes, we should definitely mess with family. We should mess with the whole realm of our ancestors and get up out of it. If it's keeping us down and we're ready to go on, then it's impeding you, then move forward. Give it up. So he says here, to hope for help from relatives and friends provides no profound solution. Don't you know that all are lost here? In case you need any more convincing, everyone's lost in Maya. Remember the story I told you yesterday about the Swami who said, oh Babaji, you ought to know, there is no aim in Maya. You can't wander around aimlessly because there is no real aim here. In other words, there's no meaning to life. You keep asking, what's the meaning of my life? What's the meaning of my life? What's the meaning of my life? Pissing and moaning, as my sister used to say, you see. There is no meaning to life. Life and birth and death are illusory. It's eternal life you want to be focused upon, you see. And eternal life is what the truth is, the wisdom traditions are trying to explain to you. What is the constituents of a spiritual life? What does it consist of? If I look at someone who's an adept or an authentic practitioner, not just a professor or a, some sort of pseudo practitioner, but I look at a real practitioner and adept. What does their spiritual life consist of? Have they grown two horns? They're somehow different than I externally? Or there's something inside that they have, something that's congealed there, some cohesion that's happened on the spiritual level. And so they've come to know these impediments, you see, vikshepas or antarayas. And they've then moved beyond them. If you recognize the obstacle, the hurdle, then you can jump over it. But if you don't know where the hurdle is, how are you going to jump over it? Run around the field jumping up in the air, fruitlessly. So you have to identify the problem, then take the hurdle. See? So then you can say, my ignorance is gone. I can put that behind me. Whew. See? I don't have to worry about it anymore, and wouldn't that be great? Not to have these things crop up later in my life. So, the hope for help from relatives and friends provides no profound solution. Don't you know that all are lost here? And he goes on to say, everyone lives in pallid imitation of everyone else. Everyone lives in pallid imitation of everyone else. So, if I was a doctor, I've got to make my son a doctor, and he's got to make his son a doctor. We're going to completely deny the fact that soul that came to me might have totally different characteristics than me, and is entirely different leanings. And I'm not going to support those leanings. I'm going to conveniently put him into this trap of Maya, like worldly parents are doing, and then we see the result of it, suffering and misery, and then you're telling me not to mess with family? No. Something's wrong with this picture. Freedom is the watchword of Vedanta. Freedom. Swami Vivekananda's favorite English word. Moksha. Liberation. Spiritual emancipation. See? That's going to put everything right. Nothing else will. So that leaning, that desire for freedom is at the foundation of Vedanta. Fifth is the obsession with work and activity. And of course, these become more and more obvious to us as we read the list from top to bottom. Those last two are big, you see, in the society today. It could be that many of the society isn't even ready, much of the society and humanity isn't really ready to awaken spiritually, so maybe that can't even be talked about because they don't even recognize that spirituality is a path, or that truth is. Matter is truth to them. Materials, money, that's truth to them, so it doesn't even come up. But if you get down to the idea of dependence on family and spouse and money, that's called the Ishana Trayam, the three bonds: family, children, and money. Ishana Trayam, it's called. Or if you get to this idea of obsession with work and activity, then all you need to do is look around and see how true that is. He says, duty is the midday sun whose fierce rays are burning the very vitals of humanity. We think of doing our duty. See? It's okay at first, Vivekananda says. Later on it becomes a morbid dream. A dream that you very much want to awaken from and move on. He says work has one facility. It's no good for liberation. It'll keep you bound. But it has one facility, and that's to prepare the mind for knowledge. So if through your work you're gathering bits of knowledge that are helping you get beyond just a slavish existence, to money, to family, to convention, to rebirth and ancestors and all that, then you're leading towards some knowledge. Then you could say, I could probably move beyond this as a cause for lack for spiritual success. It's not going to bother me anymore. I know better now. So even if a man or a woman gets married or children come and all that, then they've found ways to deal with that spiritually. They'll raise them in the Dharma. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, there are 4 fruits to life. Dharma must come first. Then artha, earning of wealth, afterwards, and kama, satisfaction of desire, after that. So basically you must start with the Dharma. The kids must be raised in the Dharma. Money must be made through the Dharma, that is legitimately, and without attachment, so forth. And all of those things that were once then the Ashanatrayam, the triple bond, all of a sudden become matters of a balanced spiritual life, see. I put my kid on my lap, bounce him, play with him, love him to death, and say, go away. You're bothering me. Time to meditate. You're leaving my mind now. So to be able to attach and detach at will is a great art of spiritual life. Whether it's with an object or with a child or with a relationship, it's a great art. You don't have to worry about catering to egos. These great beings did not pamper egos. They were out to kill egos. In case you haven't heard, the Guru is a murderer. See, much more effective than your axe murderers running around just killing mere bodies. You can do that on the battlefield, you see. Plenty of bodies dying on the battlefield. And nature is killing plenty of bodies every hour. From the moment I started speaking, nature effectively killed thousands of beings today. And thousands were born. So that's nothing compared to being able to destroy my ego. See, take a nail knife, Ramakrishna said, and destroy your own self. So you must die on your pillow at some point, the Zen Roshis say. You must die on my pillow, on my zafu. My ego must finally expire, and I get a look at my true nature. Then I'll come back, and that transformation that I was looking through spiritual success will be mine. And then I can say, there is no more cause for the lack of spiritual success. I'm now at this level. Solutions. Let's look at them. Renounce desires and cravings. Engage in daily sadhana. That's a very good 2-punch. See, 1-2 punch method. Because if you do your sadhana before your desires and cravings are dealt with, then your sadhana is going to be affected by that. So that qualification is necessary. Being able to get control of the passions, being able to attenuate your cravings, balance them out so that they're not so rising up so strong inside of you all the time. The minute you sit down, you have a craving for something. See, how are you going to meditate? So get those under control, and then engage in daily sadhana, and then the daily sadhana itself will almost put the balls in motion. See, the wheels will start rolling. And you take refuge in path and preceptor, the great teachers, and absorb yourself in love of truth. All of this has to do with commitment and sincerity. And if you don't have sincerity at the outset, then these things aren't going to go very far. But if you have a sincere desire for freedom and for truth, then these things are very important linchpins in the whole machinery. Number 5 is develop devotion to discrimination. Number 6, attain freedom from worldliness. So at some point in the early part of your sadhana, you're still aware of your worldliness. See, you're still attracted to drinking with friends. You're still attracted to jollification and insouciance and enjoyment and pleasures and so forth. But you're beginning to see that sadhana is beginning to transform your mind, and things that once attracted you don't attract you anymore. You're getting some detachment, some discernment, some vairagya. So then all of a sudden and I've seen it happen with many of my students, you're not going out with your friends and drinking every Friday night, you see, anymore. You're just not interested in it. It's left you. Your desires and your cravings and your penchant for the world have left you, and you're attracted to a new something, you see. There's something that you can't put your finger on that you're interested in. So you're moving towards these understanding of this higher truth in spiritual life. And if you're encountering these obstacles, you want to get rid of them. So the solutions are there. Basically, again, they're the teaching that's stated there. I can talk around them, but basically that's the list that Shankara gives you. Desires and cravings, and lack of a spiritual life, therefore you have to engage in one. Take refuge in a path and a preceptor. Absorb yourself in love of truth. Develop discrimination between the real and the unreal, and attain freedom from worldliness. You know, if Christ was saying anything to the fishermen along the river, it was these 6, and he walked up to them. They didn't have a spiritual life. They had rivers and nets and fishes and wives and so forth. But he said, I'll make you fishers of men. You know, there's one thing you're missing here. It's a spiritual life. So engage in a daily sadhana and take refuge in me. Come with me, follow me, I'll show you the way. See? It doesn't have to be made all biblical or all scriptural. It's just pretty much natural. When a free soul walks among you, it says, well, I can see what's wrong here. You just can't see because you're in the collective delusion of a group, you see, of a family, of a society, of a world. And a great soul like that comes and he sees as clear as can be. Oh, I see what's wrong here. Follow me, I'll show you. I'll get you out of this mess. You see, it's no big secret. It's just that you've been blindsided by all of these things. So then he gives you solutions and you get out. What about the signs for spiritual success? Tendency to do right action. Right action means doing action free of karma. If you have karma still and you're doing action, that is, you're engaging in karma, vikarma, that Krishna calls, and you haven't learned the art of akarma, there's no action, then every action you do has a result, has an effect. And good actions have a good effect, and those are binding you too, binding you to being good, which then leads back to negative, you see. So you're still caught in this wheel of dualities. But when you learn to do action in inaction, it's a very Advaitic turn of phrase there, action in inaction. When you learn to do everything knowing I'm not the doer, and do everything free of motivation, free of any kind of coloring, free of any kind of desire for an outcome, then all of a sudden the karma becomes colorless. Before it was black, then it was white, then it was gray, mixed. Now you're having what's called colorless karma, and that's the way beings come to earth. Great beings come to earth, and they don't get stuck here, because they are always engaging in action in inaction. They know the secret of not creating any karma. So, tendency to do right action, punya over papa, as the Buddhists say, merit over demerit at first, that's a sign of spiritual success dawning in you. Then the presence of natural discernment. It's not, at first you might have to exert yourself a little bit and say, I know the difference between what's essential and non-essential, but I can't quite give up the non-essential yet. See? Isn't that a problem with people? They have better sense. Say, I know what's good for me and what's not good for me, but they can't refrain from what's not good for them yet. So there's a kind of subtle discernment that develops after a while that allows you, or put it this way, it disallows you to make those foggy and hazy decisions, see, and movements. And so it's a very beautiful but very subtle thing, discernment. Dispassion, discrimination, they're all connected. And that's why Vedanta starts you out with viveka and vairagya. You must discriminate between the real and the unreal. Vairagya, you must then withdraw from the unreal. Once you get the wheat separated from the chaff, give up the chaff. That's what they're saying. You can put it biblically or any other way, but basically it's been the same teaching from time out of mind. And that teaching has been the mainstay of the spiritual aspirant. Not necessarily of the religious person, or the moral person, or the intellectual person, or the worldly person, but of the spiritual person. That's been their mainstay. To separate the wheat from the chaff, to know the difference between what's real and unreal. And it might start with know the difference between what's good action and bad action, but isn't that sort of what you should have been born with? I'm not saying that's something you should have to develop in this life. You're not an animal, you know, and you're not an evil person. You've come into this life with some good sense. You're not an asura, a demonic kind of soul. You're a sura, you're a godly type of soul. So those beings are born from heavenly realms, you see. But heaven is not, as I said yesterday, our ultimate goal. To get beyond heaven, earth, and hell is what we want. Didn't we chant that this morning? Say peace to all, from me no danger be to aught that lives. Those that dwell on high, to those that lowly creep, I am the self and all. All life, both here and there, do I renounce, all heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes, and all fears. Memorized that one yet?
Sorry.
All life here do I renounce, all heavens, all earths, and all hells. Vivekananda couldn't have put it any clearer. And don't forget, along with it, all hopes and fears. His two least favorite qualities. He said, of all my qualities, all the positive qualities in humanity, hope is my least favorite. Because if you have to have descended to hope, then it's sort of a last-ditch effort. Oh, I hope, you know. You're hoping when you're God in a human body, when you have all this, and you have everything else back inside of you, the kingdoms of heaven are within you, I and my Father are one, all the teachings are there, and you've descended to hope, something's wrong with that picture. So give up hopes and fears, and renounce all life. I just said, life has no meaning. It's eternal life that has the meaning. So give these up, sannyas and bold, say, Om Tat Sat Om. In other words, I am that truth. Sat is truth, Tat is that. Tadrupa. That's a Sanskrit word that's very interesting. Tadrupa. Oh, he's the form of that. See. Of what? Of Brahman. Tat means Brahman. Oh, he's the form of Brahman. Sounds understated, but it's probably the greatest of all. To be born of Brahman, to be born of enlightenment. And that would be the only way. That would be the only way to be born free. Otherwise, the statement is a misnomer. No such thing as being born free. You're born limited. From the avatar to the ant, you're born limited. It's just in the case of the avatar, mother will start removing the veils herself early on. That's a past master you're talking about. Others will have to labor under those veils until they realize that they don't want to suffer anymore, which means they don't want to enjoy anymore, because enjoyment brings suffering. And when enjoyment and suffering go, then they start getting some solutions come to them. Maybe I can transcend the deluding pairs of opposites. Dvandva mohena, Krishna calls them in the Gita. Maybe I can transcend the deluding pairs of opposite and open my single eye and know the truth. So discernment is a deep teaching, something to be meditated upon, just like all of these were meditated upon. I mean, eventually you won't have to meditate on earth, air, fire, water, and ether, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, seeing anymore. That'll be behind you. And now you can start meditating on compassion and love and form and formlessness and things that are worthy of your attention. As I say, you've been born as a noble human being. Why should you be laboring these little details? Isn't the devil in the details? So give these up, sannyas and bowl. I didn't ask you to say that. Everything I say, they're going to say Om Tat Sat Om. What are we having for dinner? Om Tat Sat Om?
Yummy.
The third one is increased knowledge of reality. So you can know the nature of God, you can know the nature of the soul, and you can know the nature of the world, right? And so once you know that, is that it? No, you can increase your knowledge of reality. You know the nature of reality is changeless, birthless, deathless, formless, and so forth. But now you get into it with a new mind, see? And with that new mind, you begin to uncover the deeper truths of reality. And that is worthy of pondering, see? That can put you in samadhi. There's a samadhi called wisdom samadhi. Probably you've had it, some of you, in flashes. It's called sampragyata samadhi, or savichara samadhi, and where you realize all knowledge lies within you, and that stuns you. Probably what happened to Christ when he sat so long in the wilderness, and the birds pecked grains from his hair, and so he'd been sitting so long. He probably had gone into a stunned consciousness because of having this wisdom samadhi. Jata samadhi, they call it in India. So there are ways of increasing the knowledge of reality in you. That is, it's all within you, but you have to specify it. You have to put the spotlight on it and draw it out. Then enjoy it. You see, it's a different kind of enjoyment. Enjoyment of spiritual knowledge is a whole different level of enjoyment. It doesn't usually have a sour side effect like suffering. Its side effect is usually, as you just said. This is free of karma. This is leading me towards triveni, leading me toward the meeting of the three spiritual currents. Now, as we're running towards our break here, let's do these final two. Non-reliance on body, senses, and morals. There's a teaching of good and bad, and virtue and vice and all that at the moral level, which is a step. But Vedanta sort of figures, if you've come to Vedanta, or if you're practicing yoga, or if you're aware of the wisdom traditions, then probably you don't need to worry about morals and ethics too much. What you need to be worried about is eternal life, as I just said. So it's not a matter of, for you anymore, of thou shalt not kill. It's a matter of realizing you cannot kill, because nothing was ever born. So you're getting into a level of radical wisdom tradition that is focusing on the eternal nature of things. As we just said, you have to know the nature of reality, and you have to affirm it. And then you're going to have to confirm it with your own experience. I am a birthless, deathless soul, and I've been watching the successions of births from time out of mind that I've had. And I've been watching my ancestors, I've been watching my children, I've been watching my husbands and wives. It's all been a stream flowing by me, but I was sitting on the banks, calm, peaceful, serene, in love with discrimination between the real and the unreal, always fully discerning. So non-reliance on body, senses, and morals is a step, is a sign of spiritual success. You don't find a person brooding anymore on this and that moral law. You find them meditating on the Dharma, not brooding on morality and moral laws, meditating on the Dharma, see, on those rich field of wisdom teachings which free one, but have no bad side effects. Now, the will to perform spiritual practice is final. That's a rare thing. See, even I said this the other day as I was thinking about the SRV Sangha and all the people who have come into it, and also many of the Vedanta societies and the people who attended there. These people in the West are not given to meditation. They don't want to meditate. Hard for them to even do a half hour. See? So they're not into the art of formlessness yet. So the will to do a spiritual practice is going to be hard-pressed right there. The will to serve others, that the Westerner has to a certain degree. The will to do devotions in church and at home and so forth, that the Westerner understands. The will to study, the Westerner understands that a little bit, although we want to shift the study from secular to spiritual and include that in our schools, if you ask me. See, they're getting all secular education and none of this. This is what you seek first, and everything else gets added unto thee. It's not a matter of, oh, let's keep Muslim religion out of the West, or, let's be careful of Christian fundamentalism and so forth. Truth is truth, and the soul's going to decide about that anyway. Let's put it before them and let them decide which path they want. If you try and hide it away somewhere, they're just going to go looking for it. It's not a matter of subversiveness, you see. It's a matter of revelation, exposure. See? And then let the soul choose. Isn't that freedom? Isn't that what we boast about here in America? That's the boast of the American, freedom, independence, and so forth. We're not acting like it then, and especially on this level of our schooling, where we might as well be drawing curtains and veils down in front of our children's eyes about things that would ultimately free them very early in life, things that we had to suffer as we grew up. I look back on my own spiritual path and I consider it rather a miracle that I was able to understand what I do. With everything I saw that was in my way as a child growing up, even with good moral parents, everything that was in my way, I find it rather miraculous that I survived spiritually. So that's a rather sobering statement for a guru, for a spiritual teacher to make, right? But there I can make it, here in the West, you see. So basically, this exposure of beings to truth is very important, and then they will develop this will to live a spiritual life and to do some practice. Otherwise, in the atmosphere of what you've been given, have you ever thought before you met your teacher or your path that you would ever do spiritual practice? Did it ever occur to you? You have to hear first about Brahman, then you have to roll it over in your mind, and then you realize it. If you never hear it, then you'll never do the manana practice, you see. You'll never consider it. And then you'll never get realized. And that's called samsara. These wheels of birth and death rolling along. So the will to perform a spiritual practice is very rare, and I'm saying amongst the three yogas, we have a good start. In meditation, we're faltering. Of course, there are some schools, Buddhist schools and so forth, in which they're sitting for 8 hours at a time. One feels sometimes that's going extreme the other way. like then Vivekananda would walk up to you and say, you're meditating for 8 hours while the person outside is suffering, from starvation. Go do a little service. 1 hour of good meditation ought to be enough for you, if you can master that. And then go out and help someone. You see. Meditate with your eyes open, not just with your eyes closed. So there are these extremes on both sides. We need to balance, middle way kind of path. Buddha, Sri Sharda Devi, Holy Mother, Krishna, they're good exemplars of the middle path. As strange as it seems to call Buddha a middle path adherent, because he was very, very monastic and ascetic for a long time. But when he had his realization that everything is nirvana, then he became so compassionate, you see. Everyone had a doorway in. And that is the nature of a truly great soul. Vivekananda called him probably the greatest soul that ever came to earth, Lord Buddha. So you could see how much the Indians revere Lord Buddha. At all levels, Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, every level of the Buddhist path. Very important soul to us, and 550 years previous to Christ. So, definitely there on the throne of compassion, even before Jesus came along. Although I tend to think that Jesus and Buddha were the same soul. about every 500 years, a great soul like that appears. So let's finish this first half of the class with this quote at the bottom by Shankara. Conviction about the truth proceeds from constant counsel with realized souls. It will never come from repeated ablutions in the holy Ganges, nor by 100,000 asanas or pranayams. Further, realization is brought about by spiritual discrimination, not by millions of acts. Action may eventually purify the mind, but of itself it does not lead to direct perception of reality. So, in just one sloka, he pretty much takes to task all these things, doesn't he? Basically work, not going to get it there, asana, breathing, minor practices like that aren't going to get you there. They just have a certain facility for a while, but you're going to have to move beyond them. And the quicker you move beyond them, the better for you. Because enlightenment doesn't hold out its carrot very long, in case you haven't noticed, you see. Dangling there in front of you. Do you want mumukshutvam? Do you want a true desire for liberation? It's very rare in the human being. So one lifetime if you have it in one lifetime, you should take it. Take advantage of it in that lifetime. Now, the only other thing to say is here. With a mind made sharp by thoughts on reality alone, release and penetrate the mark, the imperishable Brahman. That's that quote from the Upanishads, Dhanur Grihitva Upanishadam Mahastram, taking as bow that mighty weapon furnished by the Upanishads, then fasten to it the arrow of mind, made sharpened by thoughts on reality alone, like you've been hearing for the last hour and a half. Then, pointed at the target, that imperishable Brahman, release and penetrate the mark. So the great archer, like Ram, spiritually speaking, will help you do that. So let's think about that during our break and come back in 10 or 15 minutes. While we're away, live stream audience can look at these charts.
There is no
Welcome back to our second half of the Sunday class in San Francisco at the Healing Center, also known as the SRV Association of San Francisco. And here, as you have seen by the first hour and a half, we engage very deeply in the thinking process. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. And that's going to happen by necessity and of natural course over a period of time. Sri Ram says, enlightenment dawns on the mind by stages. So it's something that one doesn't see happening to oneself. Holy Mother said, if you're on the way to Benares from Calcutta on train and you fall asleep, then you don't see any of the landscape go by. All of a sudden you wake up in your Benares. So in that way, we note our spiritual progress to be very gradual. That's why we looked at the lack of spiritual success, the solutions, and the signs, so that we do have some sort of barometer for measuring a subtle thing like that. Also, it's true of the opposite. Our ignorance goes away in very, very subtle ways. We can never really say it's real. You really can't call your ignorance your own. It seems to belong other places than you, than your true self. Yet you're taking it on or letting it sort of leach into the cracks in your sleeping consciousness, in your deep sleep, and your waking state even. You fall out of cognizance of the truth. And so it's a matter of your own doing. So to be on vigil, to be concentrated and fully focused, be sitting like a yogi, studying, meditating, and doing your devotions like we did last night, and keeping constant. That is basically satyena labhyastapassa hyesa atma samyagyanena brahmacharyena nityam antaha sharirihi jyotirmaya hi shubhraha, and so forth. It means the realization of the Atman is gained by knowledge, moderation, by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. So you have to keep at these things all the time until finally the knowledge that is within you appears, or the ignorance that's veiling it disappears, whichever way you want to say it. And that will happen by stages. Enlightenment dawns in the mind by stages. You have to have the faith to keep up your practice. So we ended up there. The will to perform spiritual practice. You might say it's a little different than just to engage in daily sadhana, because engaging in daily sadhana, is I have to do this, right? Somebody told me to do this. It's what my teacher wants me to do. So I better do an hour of meditation and I better study some. So you're sort of, again, coming from the moral, ethical level. But when you get an actual will to perform spiritual practice, then all of a sudden you're willingly engaged in your own enlightenment process. As we just chanted, remaining cognizant of the fact that all is Brahman is tantamount to enlightenment. All you have to do is remember that fact. All is Brahman, all is Brahman, all is Brahman. That is enlightenment. And if you keep that and hold that long enough, then pretty soon that'll be your default zone, rather than all is Maya, or all is ignorance, or all is spiritual practice, or whatever level you happen to pass through. You have to remain constant in that realization that all is Brahman. That is enlightenment. All of this we've been taking from these last slokas. So I'm going to read you the last 3 slokas of the Upanishad of chapter 2. So we will have say here in San Francisco, we've come to the end of chapter 2, and when I'm back here in February, we can begin chapter 3. This is, the one we just took with this chart was, just as the same mental disc which was stained by dust earlier shines brilliantly when polished, so the embodied being, seeing the truth of the Atman, realizes oneness, attains the goal, and becomes sorrowless. So about a month ago I created this based on that sloka for all of you in Portland and here. And in Hawaii when I get back to see this. And the live streaming audience has now seen it a couple times, been able to look at it. Pretty much an assessment by Adi Shankaracharya, one of the greatest of Advaitic seers, about these 3 levels of spirituality in us. You can find it basically in the Viveka Chudamani in a different form, but I've managed to collect it here for you, to put it into a picture, into a chart, into a demonstration visually, so it can cement it more into your mind's eye. Then he goes on to say, that is Shvetashvatara, when the yogin realizes the truth of Brahman through the perception of the truth of the Atman in the body as a self-luminous entity, then, knowing the divinity is unborn, eternal, and free from all modifications of nature, he is freed from all transgressions. Penultimate sloka. This divinity pervades all directions in their entirety. He is the firstborn, Hiranyagarbha. He has entered into the womb. He alone is born and is born in the future. He is inside all beings as the indwelling self and is facing in all directions. So, you might not ever be born. It's not you that's being born again and again. It's Brahman that's being born again and again. Which is kind of a contradiction to the Advaitic law. But there's nothing else but Brahman. If you say it from that standpoint, then that's Brahman that's being born in the womb, and it's Brahman that's passing through the body. Krishna has a nice way of saying that, actually. He says, like the wind takes scents from flowers and distributes them in different areas. Just like that, the Lord comes into many bodies and takes them on and distributes them here and there and then gives them up. So, unseen, Krishna says. The Lord is unseen as he does all that work. So it's only the Lord that's doing everything and anything. It's all happens by that supreme will. And that's all that's going to happen in the future, and that's all that's also happened in the past. It's just Brahman. It's a happening thing. The last sloka is salutations to the divinity who is in fire, who is in water, who is in plants, who is in the trees, who has pervaded the whole universe. End of chapter 2. So having accomplished that, then let's look back on the first of these slokas we read and look at it in terms of what a luminary truly is. That is basically when the yogin realizes the truth of Brahman through the perception of the truth of the Atman in the body as a self-luminous entity, then, knowing the divinity is unborn, eternal, and free from all modifications of nature, he is freed from all transgressions. So we want to probably look into the constituents of what a luminary consists of, what we're calling a seer, or a realized soul, an enlightened being, a sage, whatever name you want to give. The first quote here is from the Nirvana Upanishad, one of the minor Upanishads that we've been talking about lately. Those qualified souls who are fit to study the Upanishads are protectors of the field in which I-ness is destroyed. To them, all beings and the world are pure consciousness. To them, talk about the uprooting of karmas amounts to mere words, for the illusion of I-ness has been cremated and spread about in the cemetery of self, of Brahman. For others, these luminaries represent a ship with which to cross the ocean of earthly existence. And of course, there are many songs about that. We often sing them, as you know. Remember that one that we all like, for instance. Nara Deva Deva Jaya Jaya Nara Deva Nara Deva Deva Jaya Jaya Nara Deva. That is victory to God who dwells in man. So that's the luminary. And what do I do with that? Shakti Samudra Samuta Tarangam Darshina Prema Vijrimbita Rangam Shanshaya Rakshashana Shamahastram Yami Guru Sharanam Bhavavainyam Nara Deva Deva Jaya Jaya Nara Deva. In other words, I make a complete offering of myself to my Guru, who is a huge wave of purity rising out of an infinite ocean of Shakti, Shakti Samudra, whose Leela floods the being with a love that's indescribable. That is his divine play. And Yami Gurum Sharanam Bhavavajam. See, I make a complete offering of myself to my Guru. So that's how the great devotees of the Lord feel about a manifestation of Brahman when he comes into the body. Nada Deva Deva, Jaya Jaya Navadeva, written by Swami Vivekananda, one of the 3 or 4, I think 4 maybe, songs he wrote in his life that I'm aware of. So just look quickly down the scope here. What is the final beatitude of the luminary? Is their ideal. Life has to be infused with an ideal, especially if you're going to believe what I just said, that it has no meaning. Ordinary life has no meaning. It's just rounds of birth and death, right? And the same old things. Everyone living in pallid imitation of everyone else. Does that sound like meaning? So you probably should have an ideal. And that ideal to us here at SRV would be Sharda, Ramakrishna, and Vivekananda, our ideals, our chosen ideals, our ishtams. They're actually Sanskrit words for that. Interestingly enough, Isha was a name they gave Christ when he came to India. He was supposed to have arrived there in Tibet and India, according to several accounts. So they called him Isha, the chosen one. So they saw a great light shining off that being. Fishermen couldn't recognize him very easily. See, it took a John the Baptist to do that. But in India, they recognized him in droves. And they immediately gave him that name, the chosen one. So they know their luminaries, who have happened to them by the thousands. India is not just a matter of one holy book and one prophet or one messenger or one avatar. It's a matter of hundreds of each. The mother of all religions, they don't call her that for no good reason. So out of India's come yoga and tantra and samkhya and vedanta and Buddhism and Jainism and Sikhism and so forth and so on. So many darshanas, as my grandmother used to say, more than you can shake a stick at. And the luminaries that both birthed them, that is, composed these systems, and followed them, and taught them to others. See, so we take refuge there. I go for refuge in that great being, whose Leela floods the being with love. See, just to see his divine play floods my mind with love. As if that's the greatest of all knowledge, just knowing about his life. So the final beatitude for them is their ideal. They immediately run to the Guru as soon as they're born. The earliest they can get initiation, the better. Get it done, because otherwise Maya is there dancing, able to flummox the minds of even the most wise beings who may fall into its clutches. So they immediately go for refuge. Ramakrishna had several gurus, and he was an avatar, they say, worshipped by 5 million people now or so. So in that case, if they go to a teacher, how much more should we go to a teacher and get these matters settled? Now, the river of immortality is their heart. Talk about Triveni, see, that triple set of nerves that's going up the spine and arriving at the third eye, Triveni, the meeting of the 3 holy rivers. Well, that river of immortality is where they live. They're boatmen there. They help you ferry the ship of your body-mind mechanism across the solid earth, right into the river of immortality. Lord Kapila, one of the greatest of the ancient Samkhyas, the founder of the Samkhya system, said that there are 2 streams, 2 rivers. One is called Samsara Pragbara, and one's called Koivalya Pragbara, and millions of souls are running along those. Unfortunately, Samsara Pragbara is more populated than Koivalya Pragbara. Very few people are attaining Koivalya, freedom, and even less are even aware of the possibility of it. See? So samsara is where most of those souls end up. That is, Pragbara means a kind of dam. So it's like, the idea is this kind of dammed up river. It's just overflowing with souls who can't find their way. So he said, study the 24 cosmic principles, meditate on them and so forth, as we were doing earlier in some of these charts, and get the matter clear so you can extricate yourself from them. Will you study the cosmic principles so that you can join with them? Are you mad? Nature is where death happens. Do you die? And if you give yourself to the illusion of death, as Ramprasad sings, then what kind of a fix are you in? So you're going to want to renounce nature, you're going to want to transcend it. And then if you visit it again, it's just that. It's a sojourn. It's a good place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. See? And I wouldn't want to leave home without my Atman. Visas and MasterCards, fine. See? But you wouldn't want to leave home without your Atman. That is your true home. Your natural abode is that true self. So they know this, so they live in the river of immortality. Buddha may have gotten out of the physical river and sat on the banks long enough to get his realization. Then he jumped back in the river of immortality. He traded off one for the other. Now, what is their preceptor? Do these beings have a preceptor? Yes, the realized sage is their preceptor. There was a story about Sri Aurobindo finding his guru. He met him and talked with him for 2 hours and got initiation. And that was the only time he ever saw him in his whole life. That was on a train. The man's name was Bhaskar Leli. So he asked Sri Aurobindo, a young, beautiful young man, see, have you been initiated? No. Well, I better give you your initiation then. Got it. That's one of the first things you've got to do. It's not everything, it's a start. You get the body pure by mantra diksha. That's what my teacher told me. One of the few things he told me about it. He says, your body gets purified by the mantra. When you do it on your hand, it builds up a subtle energy, he said. It goes up your arm and into your heart, and it purifies the body. Why is that necessary? So that you can go into holy company. Because you can't, if not. If you have an impure body, then they don't. You might have noticed. Sri Ramakrishna said, cows lick each other's bodies, but they drive horses away. So in this rendering, the horse is the worldly person, not going to mix. You see, with the spiritual person, and the spiritual person is not going to want to mix with the worldly person. So there's another distinction you should make. You see, the division between the demoniacal and the divine. It's demoniacal to be bond slave to nature, to be a materialist, to not believe in God. Vivekananda said, I love everyone. I love my God the good, I love my God the holy, I love my God the suffering, and most of all, I love my God the evil. But he said, if you ask me who I want to talk to, I want to talk to holy people. I have to talk to the others. You see. He said, bless them all, but save me from them en masse. That was a beautiful statement. Bless them all, but save me from them en masse. You see. So he's in the river of immortality, and he's asking you to take a bath with him. Come swim, you see. Swim in this bath of immortality and get free, and then I'll count you one with me. Now, what is their activity? Free of convention. Basically, to put it in 3 simple words, because I didn't have a lot of space. Free from mundane human convention, as Lex Hickson used to say. Beautiful phrase he coined. Mundane human convention. Or you could think of it as superficiality, see, bubble-headedness. See. Not even thinking about God even by accident, as Ramakrishna said. What is their knowledge? Comprehensive. They know all the systems, as I was saying. This is just a splinter, you see, of the charts I've shown you yesterday and today, some 5 or 6 charts, just a very small veneer of 200 I've created. And that 200 is just another very small cross-section of thousands which could be created based upon this infinite knowledge of Brahman. So one respects the saints and the sages and the rishis. That's a loka. And if I attain that, I attain something beyond the ancestors, beyond the gods and goddesses. So that's a good place to set my sights, you see. So I better qualify myself. So when I walk in there, I have, 1, my initiation, so I can enter holy company, and 2, something to talk with them about. Because if I walk into that realm and say, oh, how's the weather here in Jnana Loka? Or I start telling a joke, it's basically 3 men walked into a Jnanakasha. It was Buddha, Vedavyas, and Patanjali. And they saw the father of the Samkhya system, Kapila, there, and they all saluted him and they said, "Thank you very much." So 3 men walked into a Jnanakasha. You have to have something to talk with these seers about. I mean, try talking to my teacher. You didn't hold a conversation with him. It wasn't such a thing. You should have been on the phone with him if you wanted to know the meaning of loneliness, see, and abandonment. Hello? Well? Well? You see. That was his mantra on the phone. Well? Why are you bothering me, as it were? Well, we're going to come and visit you. Well, okay, goodbye. That was about the conversation you had with him. So his mind was there in the river of immortality, and you were coming out of the river of samsara and trying to find some foothold. So you probably want to listen to his lectures, go to his meditations, and do worship, get to know him a little bit, get as close to him as you could, so maybe you might have a meeting with him. And when he gave you a private meeting, they kept boxes of Kleenex there, because everyone would cry. He wouldn't uncover himself. He was Holy Mother's child. And then when you sat next to him, and you had all these questions you were going to ask him, and they would just disappear. Couldn't remember what you're going to say. You're looking at divinity here. And basically, you'd start, grab for a Kleenex, But that's because he smiled at you. It's the only time he ever did. The only time he ever talked with you was in private. And then all of a sudden, he was Holy Mother's child, and Holy Mother was actually coming through him. Swami Sheshananda was disappearing somewhere to the back in the caves, you see, of consciousness. And in the caves, and you couldn't give the man gifts. You'd throw him into his fireplace. So giving of gifts, is supposed to be keep you attached to the world, so you don't remember your past lifetimes. That's a parigraha, the yama of yoga. So he epitomized that. Take a gift and walk up to his room and toss it in the fireplace. I actually looked in his room once, and there were gifts flowing out of his fireplace like a snowbank. So I'm not exaggerating. Non-giving of gifts and non-receiving of gifts was the line. You didn't cross it. He didn't own anything. He wouldn't take anything. He was a monk. So, American man learning from a Hindu monk, good thing. Because you learned all the original axioms of Advaita Vedanta without any compromise. And they are such things as the non-transformation of reality. There's no transformation in Brahman. So if you're seeing things transform, you must not be in Brahman yet. Like nature transforms, right? If you're seeing change, then that's as far away from Brahman as you can get. Brahman is changeless. That one statement, that one truth, if you understand it right and accept it, clarifies so many thousands of doubts and problems that arise in the human mind. The non-transformational nature of Brahman. Aparinama, they call it. Vivekananda talked about it a lot. So anyway, an example, their knowledge is comprehensive. What is their observance? They observe the restraint of the senses. They don't give free rein to the senses. Whoa, boy. We're pulling back on those 5 horses. And with the reins of prana, you see, and keeping it, like we looked yesterday in that chart, keeping everything under control, because if anything gets a little out of control, then that's room for Maya to come running, you see. Any contrary happening that can happen to you in the world will, in case you haven't noticed. It's very aggravating for a perfection-loving soul. See, talk about Robert's rules. The whole other side to it, and the level of spiritual perfection. The slightest little hair out of place drives you crazy, you see. And so those things will come running at you. So you keep everything under control, as perfectly controlled as you can possibly control it. And when things get out of control, that's no reason for you to get out of control. You remain equanimous. 100,000 people die in a tidal wave, 100,000 bubbles just popped and returned to the river of immortality. Doesn't bother the illumined soul in the least. What bothers them is that they might be reborn again in ignorance. That bothers them. So they don't celebrate the birth of the child. Happy birthday to you. Oh, no. Happy non-birthday is what they're going to say. Basically, they're thinking about this soul. Who is that? Where did he come from? What's his karma? How can I get him free? Those are the kind of questions that would immediately occur to him if he looks at this little baby. See? Not goo goo gaga. See? Let's make a fool of ourselves in front of this other fool. See? We just got it embodied. So, if you're going to be born at all, be born in pure consciousness. That's how Vivekananda put it. Otherwise, don't come here anymore. Try to get free. Try to have freedom just once. Even a taste of freedom, try and have it just once. And then you'll know that there's no comparison between this and that. That's what the Katha Upanishad says again and again. Those who realize that, peace belongs to them and to none else. No one else gets peace except those who realize Brahman. And this is that. And then the end of the next sloka, and this is that. And the end of the next sloka, and this is that. See? Take the external and the internal, render it into one thing, meditate on it, be happy, be content, be free. Give up duality, variety, vagary, fragmentation. Make thine eye single and be free. So they will swim then in the river of immortality with comprehensive knowledge, restraining the senses if they do appear at all. What about their instruction? The main instruction. Only Brahman exists. This is just like I just said. Brahman is non-transformational. So anything that doesn't transform, go there. See? If you want to find Brahman, go there. Show me that one thing that doesn't change. Or as one great questioner in ancient India said to the great rishis, talk about getting initiation and being pure so you could be holy, has pure body so you could get into holy company. He finally made his way into a circle of very realized souls who were in the body. And they said, what's your question? And he said, teach me that one thing by which knowing all else is known. And they all went into samadhi. I don't know if he ever got his question answered, but that was the best question they had ever heard. Probably the only good question ever asked. Teach me that one thing by knowing which all else is known. And that would be that transformationalist Brahman. So, only Brahman exists. If you went to Ramana Maharshi, silent all the time, if he said anything to you, it'd probably be something like that. Why are you bothering me? See? Well, I wanted to know about existence. Only Brahman exists. And he went back into samadhi. What's their dedication to their disciples? That they have. If there's any attachment at all. Sangha. Interesting word, Sangha, in Sanskrit. The opposite is asanga. Asanga means those who don't need any more holy company. They're not looking for holy company anymore. They want to be alone. Kaivalya means isolation. Beautiful thing about the Ramakrishna order Swamis, the direct disciples, there were 16 of them, that when they went wandering on pilgrimage, they went alone. Maybe they might leave in twos or threes, but then they'd split off and say, see you later. You see? And then they'd go have these experiences of holy pilgrimage. And then if they happen to run into each other in some city, they'd just be overjoyed and hug each other and laugh. And oh, what have you done? What have you done? How's your vision of Brahman? As my teacher used to tell the joke, he said, he met along the highway and asked somebody, how's your vision? And he said, oh, I can still read the phone book. That's not what I meant. So, how's your inner vision? I don't care how your eyes are doing. Talk about 4 eyes. We talk about 1 eye. So they have dedication to their disciples. They want others to be free. That's why they've come. There's no other reason to be here. Why would they come? Once having realized their true nature as being formless, bodiless, deathless, eternal, blissful, full of knowledge. Why would they come here? They must come out of some compassion. And that compassion isn't to remove your suffering. Sorry, surface Buddhists out there. They don't come to remove your suffering. Christ did not come for you to expiate your sins, if you want to put it that way. He came to show you the light. He came to show you your internal perfection. That's why they all come. And if you're having problem understanding that, then that's where they'll exercise compassion. Oh, you don't understand that? Here, let me take a little time with you. Have you got a lifetime to give to me? It'll probably take about that long, because you've taken many lifetimes to get into this mess. Give me 1 lifetime to get you out of it. Well, the Buddhists say 3 lifetimes. See, the nidanas or links are so strong that it take you 1 life to develop the karma, 1 life to recognize you're in a mess, and another lifetime to snap the links. Snap the chains of birth and death and get free. So unless you have a very great teacher who can get you out of it in a short time. That is, get you out of your own mental delusion around it, you see. It's not like devil's in the way or God's not giving you grace. It's that you yourself are in your own way. So get out of your own way. And that's why we're looking at the constituents of a luminary. See, this is how a luminary is and how it thinks according to the scriptures. What about their appearance? Like 12 crores of suns. Crore is a very large number, by the way. By crore. So many brilliant, much brilliant light coming off them. There's a word called dhatu in Sanskrit. It's a good name for someone. I think I'll call you dhatu. You see? It means that energy you store up, which eventually will turn to ojas, which will eventually turn to tejas. So ojas is this spiritual orange juice, I call it, you see. Basically it's this light that you get from doing sadhana after you eat holy food. And then if you take that and refine it, it's called tejas, and that comes out your pores. Like Christ and Buddha had an aura. So that tejas is actually a transmitting power. If you sit in the light of what's coming off them, tejas, you get transformed without even knowing it. You're already free. Your mind just has to catch up with the fact. So that's how fortunate you are to be an Ishvara Koti, those who attend upon the avatars from lifetime to lifetime. The Noble Eight of Buddha, or the 12 Apostles of Christ, or the 16 direct disciples of Ramakrishna, or the maybe 18 or 22 apostles of Shankara. Yeah, a whole entourage. Their protection is the presiding deity. If you come into a world of name and form, then you should espouse a deity. You should get to know the deities at all levels of being, because as you come inside out in the evolutionary process, spiritually speaking, you're going to run into these deities. They're called guardians at the gate. So you see them, you meditate on them, you have the mantra for them, and they let you pass, both directions. And that's why people probably can't move beyond their ancestors, because there's a deity of wealth, of greed, of guarding wealth there. Kubera, sometimes they call him. And basically won't let you pass because you haven't gotten over your gluttonous appetites yet, you see. So these deities are, if you don't like to think of them as forms, then think of them as energies. See, like blockages or energy passages inside of this great network of subtle nerves that is part of the cosmic body of God. So if you come into the realm of name and form, you're going to have to espouse a deity, adopt a deity. It's my presiding deity, Mother Tara, see, or Samantrabhadra, or Kali, see, or Shiva, or Vishnu, Krishna. See, there's a deity that will protect you. So that's their protection. What is their movement? The Unmani state. An interesting word. It's a kind of samadhi. It's a kind of liberation. It's also indicative of stoppage of the mind, unmana. The mind doesn't think anymore. So the state they like to adopt is just mindless. Not in a negative sense that we use that in the West, but no thoughts. They can turn off their thought process and just abide without creating any vibrations on the field. There's this big field out there, the mind field. It can become a minefield if you're not careful. So you have to move about it very carefully, you see. And so they're not moving about it at all, is the point. They see the mind, and they say, I think I'll stay where I am. It's the safest place. I mean, think about it. If you're a soldier in a minefield, why do you want to move? If you were a yogi, you'd say, oh, this is no problem. I'm just going to sit here till the helicopter comes, you see, or something. So why this need to move in the mind field? Don't you know that they've said, the Buddha and others have said, everything comes to he who waits? So the Unmani state is rather like that. They just have this mind that is motionless, a state of mind that's motionless, very peaceful, equanimous. No need to go grasping or looking for things, see, because they know it's all within them, and they know that with a certainty. Now, what about their clothing? It's a garland of bliss. What about their deep study? The revealed scriptures. And everyone from Vasishta, the ancient Rishi, one of the 10 mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, has said that the revealed scriptures, you need to make a distinction between them and the ordinary scriptures. The ordinary scriptures are leading you into bondage, into heaven, into rebirth again in ignorance. The revealed scriptures will take you out of that. So a very good teaching for the spiritual path is to always seek out the revealed scriptures and those beings who can explain them to you, as those are means for liberation. There has to be something good in this world that is really freeing. There it is, you found it. Clarity of mind, prasad. Prasad's not just food. It's prasad of food, it's prasad of mood, it's prasad of mind, and it's prasad of spirit. There are 4 kinds of prasad. So you want that, we just said Unmani state is sort of a prasad of mind and mood, isn't it? They're always very equanimous and peaceful. So you would probably also want this kind of prasad that comes from clarity of mind. And that you get from the revealed scriptures. They talk about nothing but your relationship with Brahman. In fact, first of all, they'll talk about nothing but Brahman. Then, if you force them, they'll talk about your relationship with Brahman. If you force them any further, then they'll talk about Ishvara, the chosen ideal, which is there. You go any lower than that, you talk about my problems. They're saying, I don't want to go there. Your problems aren't real. Give them up. Resist not evil. All knowledge lies within you. You're an ever-perfect soul. You're not a sinner. You have original perfection, innate perfection in you. Be like thy Father in heaven. So they're going to have a hard time finding the revealed scriptures conceding in that way. No concessions. Nothing lower than just the form of God, and then back up to the form of Brahman. They dip that far and no further, no deeper. Try reading the Brahma Sutras, and then you'll know what I mean. Without a teacher, you can't even understand them. Those are like the Vedantic koans. You have the Zen koans. If there was any such a thing as a koan in Vedanta, it would be the Brahma Sutras. They're incomprehensible to the ordinary mind. They're even hard for the spiritual mind to comprehend. What are they saying? So you need a teacher. It's a revealed scripture. It's coming from a place that this comes from. Only Brahman exists. Well, can you say anything more about it? No? There's nothing more to say. Read my lips. What part of that sentence didn't you understand? It's like we say, the famous teaching that gives everyone so much problem when they first come to Vedanta is Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya. Brahman is real, the world's unreal. Everyone right away goes, oh, the world is unreal? And the seer goes, didn't they hear the first thing I said? Brahman is real. I should have clarified all your doubts and put everything fine. So pay attention to what I'm saying. It's like we hear the last things they say. What about the first things they say? Do you want to listen to your grandfather when he's ailing and on his deathbed? Or do you want to listen to him when you first saw him and you were a young boy? You see, get it while it's fresh. So, what is their meaning? Existence of Brahman. What is their sleep? Oneness with Shiva. And it's beautiful. It's called Nidra Samadhi. If they sleep at all, they're going to go into the awareness of cessation of all things. So awareness is there when everything is here. But then when everything dissolves, like you poured some sort of spiritual acid over everything, it all just went to nothing. You see the awareness of cessation. And you see behind all forms. And there's Shiva, the last form you'll see. Can I go to sleep now? I go into the sleep of Samadhi with you. Because he's in an ever-awake state. Now, what is their seat? Free of hatha. Their one seat is free of hatha. In other words, they're not into asanas as the ultimate thing. Ekasana is what they want. This. If I can do this, then I've attained all asana. And if I can keep this for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, as I'm doing right now, then basically I'll be fine. I'll be able to meditate on God for an hour, 2 or 3 hours when I put all this wisdom away. I should be able to sit here and just go, now there's the wisdom. There it is. Now I think I'll just meditate on it. It's called Sukshma Gyan, meditation on subtle wisdom. So they need one posture to do that, and that one posture is this. Or possibly it could be lying flat. That's a posture. A lot can be done there when you're not sleeping. The problem is when people lie down, they fall asleep, because the act of lying down is associated with closing their eyes and falling asleep. There's a story about Swami Abhedananda, Swami Latu. Adbhutananda, Latu. He had a habit of lying down in the daytime and covering himself with his cloth. And so he was in an office, early Ramakrishna Math and Mission office, and a man was talking to one of the Swamis, and Latu came in and went behind the counter, chose a corner, laid down, put the cloth over him. And so the man went on talking to the Swami, and then the conversation turns towards, lazy sadhus. And so the man made some reference to, like that one over there, sleeping in the daytime. And so the Swami kind of smiled and turned and said, "Hey, Swami, did you hear that? Have you been sleeping all this time?" And Swami Buddhananda took his cloth off, sat up, and started relating everything that they'd been saying for the last half hour. So really, he just liked to lay there. He was probably waiting for them to stop talking so he could go into the peace of solitude, silence. But that posed no problem for him, whether there was talk or not. He was always in that one state. They called him Ramakrishna's miracle of all the 16 apostles, because he came from, evidently from a sort of impoverished area in Bihar, and maybe was not as literate, spiritually speaking, as the others. And he came and took refuge at Ramakrishna, and he turned into this marvelous being, as if his Atman was just under the surface there, waiting to be brought forward by this avatar. All that light brought out of him. So that oneness with Shiva and that one seat, free of hatha, just transcended all the need for hundreds and thousands of breathing exercises, hundreds and thousands of different postures I can put my body in. The luminary has arrived. Their bliss is free of the gunas. Because the gunas are, there's the kuni gunas, but that's another thing. The gunas themselves are tamas, rajas, and sattva. That's slothfulness, restlessness, and balance. And you'll find that if you attain balance, then your mind goes back to restlessness, and then it gets lazy again, and then these three gunas are always vying for supremacy in your mind, and in nature, and in the collective mind. Any given age, one guna is more predominant than the other. In America, in this particular age, for instance, rajas is definitely predominant. Restlessness. That frenetic work that everyone's doing, running their wheels. But we just saw from the teachings, in the lack of spiritual success, part of that is blamed on this penchant for doing activity all the time and never resting. That is, you've got activity and then you've got sleep. So you're going back and forth between this duality. But, it's sort of like going back and forth between restlessness and slothfulness, isn't it? But what about balance? See, isn't there a third mode to your mind when you're not sleepy and you're not restless? And that's when you're having the best meditation. And that's when you understand the scriptures, when you pick them up the best. And that's when you have more love for God in you. And lo and behold, that's when you do your best work. Didn't we just say that? Unmani state they have. They do their best work when their mind is completely peaceful. They're not creating any karma because they're not working out of restlessness and out of laziness. That's where karma comes from. Work done in those two modes. So Vivekananda used to say, don't even step outside your door if your mind is not balanced in the day. But people are now half crazy, their bodies are diseased, they have colds and flu, and they're running to work as if it were the only thing they can do. And they're sharing their suffering with others. They're putting their suffering on others. It's all a gift of this errant society. And remember, you're not supposed to receive gifts. Their support is the blessed Lord. Their compassion is divine sport. As I just said, they're really not here to remove your suffering, because Lord Buddha said, the first noble truth is suffering is. How are they going to remove your suffering when suffering is in the nature of things? That is, they might be able to remove your unnecessary suffering if you can't do it yourself. The necessary suffering is birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. Everyone suffers those in the body, from ant to avatar. Everyone suffers those. Any embodied being suffers that. But the unnecessary suffering, yes, that they could do away with if you are so inclined to put yourself in their auspice, see, under their teaching. So divine sport to them. There was a beautiful teaching in talking to Sri Ramakrishna with some devotees, and basically he was talking about how Kali flies mind kites singing the song and claps, and beings die, and she's fine with that. Beings live, she's fine with that. And one man spoke up and said, "But it sounds like our birth and our death is just sport to her." And Ramakrishna just looked at him and said, "But who are you?" He hadn't asked the question yet, In other words, what is it that's dying in you? Your body, your senses, and particularly your ego, right? So who are you? Are you those things? So don't ask me to explain Kali until you can understand that she transcends death, and that death and life are nothing to her. Penultimately, their renunciation is results and separation. They renounce the results of work, the fruits of karma, And they renounce all separations. It's very beautifully put by the luminary. If there are two things I could pick to renounce, then it might not be those two things. But when you look at a luminary, that's pretty much it. All results I hereby renounce. Didn't we just say it? All life, both here and there, do I renounce. All earths, all heavens, all hells, all hopes, and all fears. So they've renounced the right thing. Then also, they're going to renounce these apparent lines of demarcation between things. My country, your country, my body, your body, soul and nature, man and God. All these divisions that religion has created, that society has created, that philosophy has created. Everything is divisions, divisions, divisions. So I'm going to renounce those. Just be in one country here, you see. One body, one mind, one state. And that's where I'm going to live. Devil take the hindmost. So their apt conclusion is existence is. And that's even almost better, at least more efficient or more economical than saying only Brahman exists. Well, you've put it in 3 words to me, sir. Can you put it in 2? Existence is. The Atma Bodha Upanishad, another minor Upanishad, says here, just as to an owl the sun is dark, so also for an ignorant person there is darkness in Brahman. Nicely put. But Maya has gone away from me. I am the pure vision. I know myself without a second. I have ascertained the highest truth. A wise man abandons poison and favors only Amrita. Nectar. Nectar of immortality. He abandons poison. Why would he drink poison? So just as to an owl the sun is dark, so too do people not see Brahman. They look everywhere, like an owl just stare into nothingness, you see. So people look everywhere and they don't see Brahman anywhere. They don't acknowledge its existence. They don't acknowledge that it is existence, or existence is. Turn it either way, it works. It is existence or existence is. See? So we've argued for time out of mind in the West about whether God exists or not. Let's just put a capper on it and just say existence is, or God is existence. And then you don't have to put a name or a form to it. You just affirm the nature of truth. And that's your apt conclusion. Vedanta Siddhanta. It's the final and sure conclusion that all is Brahman. And then everything else can fight for survival in the light of that realization. Watch everything die, you see. Everything just dissolve like that. It's like that most corrosive substance in the universe, truth. It'll make everything dissolve, leaving only the non-dual Brahman and you. Now, that final line of demarcation between you and Brahman has to be dealt with. How am I going to negotiate that? That's Kaivalya, or isolation. So, looking into the integral constitution of the luminaries, we see, according to these Upanishads, these minor Upanishads they're called, ironically enough, what a beautiful description they've given. And of course I've culled this out. You're not going to find this necessarily in a nice list, but I've culled it out through many, many slokas to show you pretty much what they're saying about an illumined seer. As if they too are rather veiled, rather hard to see, just like Brahman. An owl can't see anything but darkness in the sun, so we look for illumined souls, hard to find them, as we're not qualified to see them, especially in the West. We're not qualified to see them because there's not been any born amongst us. Very few. Had some geniuses, had some intellectuals. But have we had illumined souls here, or did we have to borrow? To me, Vivekananda would be the first illumined American. He gave himself to this country and to England and to the world, basically. So he's the traveling sannyasin, just like Christ came among the fishermen, amongst the adherents of a decaying Judaism. and tried to bring light there, Vivekananda is coming to that self-same world again in an even more dire condition and bringing that same eternal light of consciousness to us. Now it's up to us to stand up and recognize it. And then do something about it. Now, in the remaining 15 minutes, we have anything else on the docket here. We have this, which has also been shown, but hasn't been shown in San Francisco. It's this chart called the meaning of objects. And one of the reasons that that comes up, where is that? Salutations to the divinity who is in fire, who is in water, who is in plants, who is in trees, and who has pervaded the whole universe. He has entered into the womb. He alone is born and born in the future. He is inside all beings as the indwelling self. He is the firstborn, the primeval soul, the archetypical soul, Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg, the celestial egg out of which everything has come. So all of that just said, except for Brahman itself, is an object. Wombs, fetuses, fires, trees, everything they've just said pretty much is in the realm of objectification, right? So we should take a lesson, a teaching on the meaning of objects, what the meaning of objects really boils down to. There you see, most beings beholding physical objects such as trees, animals, plants, planets, assume them to be real or actual. However, modern science has uncovered the atomic particle tree. Philosophy teaches about the illusory tree, its display being only an appearance. The luminaries, going deeper, speak of the Atman tree, or Buddha nature tree. Thus, there are three levels of existence: the external, the internal, and the absolute. Knowing about this triple subdivision, along with the nature of each, the human mind espies the truth about the manifestation and swiftly frees itself from bondage to objects. That is, once you know that what you're seeing is an appearance, is not the actual reality, then you want to immediately withdraw from it. And that's really the birth of discernment, of true discernment. I'm not engaging with objects anymore blindly. If I engage with them at all, it's going to be by way of association, not by way of identification, because I've heard this truth. So that's the yogic way. The monk and so forth may go completely away from objects and so forth and begin to go to caves and practice these various ascetic types of yoga, but for the yogi moving amongst the world and amongst the objects, he has to associate but not identify. So it becomes an art of the householder. It's an art that we have rather forgotten. Sri Ramakrishna himself said, in India, even today, there are many yogic householders, divine couples, but you don't see them. However, they're a blessing on society. So it's this idea that there are certain beings living amongst us that are looking just like us, acting just like us, and they're also having objects like us. That is, they're associating with objects. But the difference is that it's by mere association, because they've already seen through the nature of appearance. That was like one of the very first abilities that they developed, this eye of wisdom, to discern between the real and the unreal. Nitya vastu viveka, to discriminate, viveka, between nitya, the eternal, and anitya, the non-eternal. So by doing that, then they all of a sudden can detach from objects, and it's not a problem anymore. And they can much more easily find that which is not a matter of objectification. As Swami Sheshanand used to say, you have not seen the eternal subject yet. All you've seen is objects. But you must see the eternal subject. So that is God, or the luminary, because that's a representation of God in form. You may be seeing it as a form, but once you studied all this, will you see the luminary in the same way again? Can you possibly see it in the same way again when he or she appears on earth? And you must know there's something going on under the surface. And that began back here with their detachment from all objects. They even came into the body knowing they're not the body. They came into the world knowing that the worlds are illusory. So they had precognizance. We don't know that because we haven't been outside the body in an aware sense yet. That is, we don't remember it. But there exists in our causal memory the idea or the remembrance of being a formless entity, of being blissful. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be a Vedanti, see. Because you've been attracted to this idea that there's some deep bliss somewhere, and I've had it before, and I want it again. It's mine. It's actually the fourth obstacle to meditation, too. Attachment to subtle bliss. But nonetheless, I tell my students, be careful of that obstacle. They say to me, Babaji, if I have that obstacle, I'll be very happy. In other words, if I can get behind the first three, laziness and restlessness, and the third one, attachment and aversion, then if I start to get bliss, I'll be happy. That obstacle I can put up with for a while. See? But, of course, they're talking about a peace that passes all understanding. It's actually a bliss that passes all comprehension. And so that's what they're most able to identify with when they disidentify from objects. Now look at quickly into the teachings. We have a sparse amount of time here. As in all good teachings, there you see this graph here. Don't you see them? Right? Pretty much what you've been studying. The solid objects, the gross elements, 5 of them, the gross senses, 5 of them, the objects, 5 types, the subtle elements, 5 of them, subtle senses, 5 of them, projected worlds, 7 of them, thoughts and concepts, the ego-mind complex, intelligence itself, cosmic awareness, which is God's mind. But here we have added, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Here we have Om. Everything dissolving back into that primal bijam, as we learned yesterday in some of the teachings about Om. A-U-M of Om, right? Creation, preservation, destruction, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and so forth. They want you to master that. Recite Om and begin to pull it apart, just like you meditated on air, earth, fire, water, and ether. You want to eventually, in a very, very subtle meditation, meditate on A, U, and M. So it starts out with gross prana, goes to psychic prana, and then all of a sudden Chit Shakti is there, which is what you asked me the other day, a question about prana. Yes, it has a gross manifestation, the moving of your blood through the veins, the pumping of your heart, the breathing of your lungs in and out. That's all gross prana's responsibility. A lot of that's involuntary, as they say. But then when you get to the second world, the U of M, of Om, then basically you have this idea that psychic prana is beginning to work, and it's beginning to carry my thoughts, and it carries them into dream state and back to waking, and it carries them beyond death and into the new body when I'm reborn. So there's a psychic prana that's working at all these levels that is just exactly the same as the gross prana, but more refined. It's one prana in 3 different forms. And when it finally gets most refined, beyond these, gross pranas here, subtle psychic pranas here, all the way up to thought, then when it gets to the ego-mind complex and intelligence, it begins to transform, as it were, into Chit Shakti. That's a saying I'm borrowing from the father of yoga. Chit Shakti is this dynamic power of Brahman. It's intelligent power, so intelligence is its greatest sign. That is, the intellect is one thing, but the intellect is a container, isn't it? Like the Vijnanamaya Kosha is a container. But what's in the Vijnanamaya Kosha is what I want to know. That's all this. That's all this outward that has come from all this inward, that is, all these teachings. And eventually will all be poured back in totality, to Om. In the beginning was the Word. Do you understand this, John? No, Lord, I don't. Then go to Gethsemane and meditate on it. Get in there and have that meditation. Because you have to understand the cosmological process if you're going to be a fisher of men. It's not going to be enough just for you to have my grace. So you need to know this cosmological process. So here it is in a whole other list. This time it includes solid objects, because if you come down from gross elements and you put them all together, you got an object, right? Microphone, book, little tiny bit of water here, a lot of earth, a lot of air, too much ether. It's basically all ether. And some fire, isn't it? Somebody give a match, I'll prove it. To some other book. To lots of other books. Just keep these free from water and fire. So the combination of 5 elements makes the object in different permutations. More of one element, less of the other 2, more of a third, less of the 5th. And that's true all the way up into the planets in space. In fact, up there, you're probably only going to find 3 elements, because if you haven't noticed yet, air and water are in sparse demand up there. So this 5 elements making the objects gives us this teaching on the objects. And there you see it pretty much represented in this tree with subtle figures in it. There is the solidified tree, that's the appearance tree, and that's what everyone's buying into. They think the trees are real, in and of their own, separate from everything else. But when you see the atomic particle tree, which quantum physics is beginning to show us, the electron microscope and so forth like that, then you know that the thing you're looking at is deceiving you. And that deception become twofold, right over here. It can deceive you because it makes you think that objects are full, are real. And it also makes you think that they can fulfill you. If I can possess them, oh, nice and solid, you see. But nobody thinks that about sand or water. It slips right through their fingers, you see. So objects are really like that. They're made of sand. You don't build your house on sand, you build it on bedrock. So it doesn't matter whether you go to year 1 of the present age, Christ's time, or 550 years before in Buddha's time, or 5,000 years before in Lord Vasishta's time. You're going to find everyone was thinking in terms of particles, of vibration. And they had words for it. Anam, matram. Otherwise, Om couldn't have been divided up into 3 syllables, and those syllables into meanings. But they were looking at it not just from the scientific view, but from the wisdom view. All of this is impregnated by wisdom, isn't it? Chit Shakti is everywhere. And so for the luminary looking at the object, he's seeing that's a manifestation of my intelligence. All objects are mental projections. But for the non-luminary, he's looking at it and saying, that object is for my fulfillment, that object is for my pleasure, that object is for my possession. And that's the first thing the Hindu child is taught, not to think about the objects. And it's the first thing that you would be encountering when you did that meditation that Patanjali wants you to do, 8-fold meditation on all of these. See? Then you'd be proving to yourself that objects have an origin back inside the mind, right? That's one of those important steps. Its origin. If you say its origin is out there in the Big Bang and you follow quantum physics, what you're saying is everything is more externalized than I thought. The object was external enough, but when I took a little tiny particle of it and examined it under the electron microscope, I found out that it was changing at a billionth of a second. That sounds like to be farther out to me than the actual object. The nature of an object, therefore, is unknowable. You cannot know an object. I used to puzzle over that statement in the Upanishads. Now I know what they mean. You cannot know it. It's impossible to know because it's illusory. There's nothing there to know. It's empty. The Buddhists had it right on when they called it shunyata, empty. And what is it empty of? It's empty of abiding substance, and it's empty of the ability to fulfill you. So all of these, as solidified thought, are my intelligence manifested outwardly. Now, if you want to put it all together, Om is the internal, the external, and the transcendent, right? Internal, external, and the transcendent. We were talking about that just yesterday with some of these young men who have come here to study the Vedanta. So, why not quote from the peace chants? Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Everything that I hear, taste, touch, smell, and see with my gross senses is finite. See? Although it appears finite, it's really infinite, isn't it? Because there are many trees, many leaves, many seeds, many clouds, and they keep reproducing themselves ad infinitum. So the finite is even infinite. What about the infinite itself? That's even more infinite, you see. Because that's everything that's back inside of your head that got created through intelligence as an object. So what you're seeing here is the tip of the iceberg, manifested nature. But the infinite really takes on its more infinite proportions when you take it back inside of your own mind, where everything is held in potential. Everything's held in abeyance there. That's your dreaming and deep sleep state. You've got a ready supply of everything you need to fashion dreams. Also, you put them away nicely in a little cosmic chest of drawers, you see, when you go into deep sleep. I think I'll tuck them back in there. Maybe I'll iron them first. So when I bring them out next time, they'll be in good shape. I'll put them on and wear them, you see. Like a fur. Or why not just hit the lady on the head and who's wearing the fur and put her around your shoulders?
That's so true.
Walk around with objects on, you see. Many, many, many levels and layers. So from the infinite, the finite has come, but being infinite, only infinite remains. It's all infinite. We have symbols of that, you know, eight, the eight, figure eight, and so forth, and symbols for eternity. But do we really realize what they mean on the outer level, on the inner level, and on the transcendent level? So the teaching of the tree that Dalai Lama has given, and the teaching that the ancient seers have given on the three levels of existence, apply very beautifully to the object, the gross object, the subtle object, and transcendence of objects. And the seer likes to be transcendent of objects and only associate with them when he chooses. The person who has become the seen is not the seer anymore. He will attach to the objects, obsess with them, try and possess them, and try and fulfill himself with them. But they will get destroyed, they will decay, and he will become bored with them. Or they might break, see. Or they could get stolen. There's all sorts of problems with the object. So give them up, be content, and be free. So a quick teaching on the meaning of objects in San Francisco, simply because you did not see this chart. Next time I come, I will bring the charts on the nadis, the lokas, and the transmigration of soul, which I think is there. And I'll also bring teachings on the curtain of nescience, which you got a glimpse of but didn't really get the big teaching on. So please be on hand for that in February around Ramakrishna's birthday, and we will engage in that here in this very room, Divine Mother willing. May peace come up to us, may love betide all, may all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of discrimination, discernment, detachment, and realization. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.